Hi, I'm.
Once you know it's for real,
I know.
you're like,
Okay, let's stop. Hi, I'm Kirsten Jones,
and I'm Susie Walton.
and this is our podcast, #Raising Athletes with Kirsten and Susie.
Our passion is supporting parents and raising not only strong athletes, but extraordinary people.
Join us each week as we tackle all topics youth sports, including everything from early specialization and overuse injuries
to helping our kids feel empowered and learn how to advocate for themselves, not only in the classroom and on the court, but at dinner tables and in their communities.
We'll be talking to coaches, athletes, parents,
and anyone else who will speak to us
about their experiences with youth sports and their paths to success.
And even more importantly, their failures. Yes, we're going to get into the gritty details of what went wrong so that we can all learn from it. Teach our kids
and ourselves
how to do better next time.
Because in the words of Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. So welcome to Raising Athletes, because we love to win too.
Let's do this.
Hello, and welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach. And if you've been playing along for 5 years, you're going to see some new things today. One is I've been working on a little project for the last 3 or 4 months and have this beautiful space, but I've never gotten a chance to use it. So I'm really excited to actually do an in-person podcast. And who better to do an in-person podcast with than my own child. So having Caelan here to talk about something that we're going to talk about his journey. We're going to talk about how he got to where he is today at 23 years old. And it started with a dream that I recall back to the days of him being a 3, 4, 5-year-old and being obsessed with basketball. But let's start by welcoming you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mom.
This is your first podcast?
First in person, yeah.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
This is fun. I'm excited to do this. So for those who don't know us, I'm actually getting more and more people reaching out being like, oh, I didn't know your journey. I read your book and it was so cool to hear what Caelan did and how he was able to do it. Let's start off with your recollection of, we've lived several places. You were born in Amsterdam, ended up being, maybe your first memories are where? In Portland?
Yeah, Oregon.
Yeah. At ages 2 through 8, we were in Portland, maybe. Do you remember when you first fell in love with basketball?
I can remember being on the playground at, what was the elementary?
Cedar Mill?
Cedar Mill. No, before that, the pre-K.
Oh, yeah.
They had a hoop that without a backboard. It was just like one of those stand-up things. And I remember seeing...
Or at Nike.
Nike, yeah. It was at Nike. And seeing kids just shoot the ball. And remember picking it up and being like, this is very interesting. And then I think it wasn't long after that getting in the garage with Dad and him putting the ball in my hands and teaching me fingertips, sprinkle wrist, cookie jar. And it felt like from then on, I was off and running.
I remember Dad's first time coaching you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was like the Orange Scorpions.
Yeah. Your jerseys your T-shirts were orange. It was a YMCA, like snuffy league or something.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting next to a parent and the parent saying, oh my gosh, he's so good. And I have no idea what that, now thinking back, I have no idea what that meant. But I remember seeing Dad coaching you. It was a boys and girls team and you just didn't want to leave the floor. And there were a couple girls on the team that were like, no, he can play. And Dad being like, no, you need to go out there too, and allowing everybody to play evenly.
Yeah, I definitely, the worst part of the game was leaving the game, having it end, or being, even if we were up 20 or 30, I never wanted to come out.
So then we left in 2008, moved down to San Diego, and you went to El Camino Creek. So 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, so 8, 9, 10 years old. Remember those teams that you played on?
I mean, I think one of the most memorable experiences I have with basketball at that time was just one of like the first weeks, you know, I'm the new kid in San Diego, and I think the fifth and sixth, I'm in the third grade. The fifth and sixth graders have like basically every recess organized pickup games. And there was a guy who I think was probably just a teacher's assistant who would get really into it, bring a whistle, ref the games. But no other third graders were playing. And I remember walking over to like Sam Crespi, didn't even know him at the time, and getting on the court. And I want to say I held my own, but also being amazed too at how good other kids were. And then from there it was like, well, I want to be in the sixth grade pickup game as much as I can. And just looking forward to recess, and then looking forward to lunch, and then trying to squeeze out every minute at lunch to keep playing, and then staying after school and shooting with Joe and Matt and Rain. And yeah, that playground felt like a kingdom, you know. It's huge. Having gone back to it, you're like, it's tiny. And the hoops are like 8 feet, but it felt like I was playing in Staples Center.
Talk about playing for NJB and playing with your dad's coaching, and Mr. Durant's the assistant, and you guys had this great little squad.
Yeah, it basically was like a rec all-star team, right? That where you get to play all the other all-star teams in the state. Don't know how, but ended up qualifying in some way to go to the state tournament. We drove up to Hanford, California.
Hanford, yeah.
Don't even know where that is. I just remember
just north of Bakersfield.
It smelled like cow poop the whole time.
Yeah.
And going, and I don't think we had any intention of like, oh, we can win this. You know, at that age, you're like, I just want to play against the best kids. And I remember, yeah, we ended up winning the state championship at that little age, and it was one of the coolest experiences, and I think was so essential for furthering my love of basketball and being able to win and experience that with they happened to be all my best friends too. So I felt like that was a big deal, and like getting it capped off with me and Luke getting giant ice cream sundaes was like, I think at that age it was like, oh, I could be doing this for a while.
So I'll put my mom hat on for a minute, and a story that I love to tell because I can see it like it was yesterday, was walking into your bedroom in San Diego, and I didn't have anything to do with it, but you know, now it makes sense that I'm a life coach, but so maybe subliminally, but I never like, okay, sit down, grab a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But I found under your bed, underneath the dirty socks and the Sports Illustrated, 100 things I'm going to accomplish in my life. I'm going to make varsity at the time. You were going to go to this high school. We're going to win CIF. I'm going to go play for Duke. I'm going to play D1 basketball. You had written down very specifically what you wanted to accomplish. Do you remember doing that?
I can't remember actually writing it down, but I can remember listing off like 10 things at each level, right? It was like win CIF, be first team all league, and then play for this travel team, and then get this offer. I think, you know, at that time too, like play for Duke, be a McDonald's All-American, get drafted, you know, like play for the Lakers, you know, just larger than life. But yeah, it's I love that story because I don't even remember it.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, when flash forward, well, we had a couple moves in between then, but once you got to high school, one kind of tradition I did for a couple of years at least was every New Year's Eve we would do vision boards and put on the vision board what it was you wanted to create. And I think I still do have that vision board of you writing down, having the mailbox that had the letters. You drew a picture of a mailbox and it had the letters in it that were coming from the coaches, which of course is so sweet because of course it's now just over text, but and you had medals and you had get good grades and don't do drugs. Like I remember that board really, really clearly about what maybe subliminal messages you were getting from your parents.
Yeah.
Then.
How motivated I was at such a young age.
Do you remember that? Doing the vision board?
Oh, of course. I mean, I remember kicking and screaming about it being on New Year's too, and like you want to go and do what everyone else is doing on New Year's. But I think, you know, as you've seen the last year or two, I'm like, hey, can we do vision boards? You know, can we do that? I like that exercise, and I think doing that exercise in kind of different ways too, whether it's like before the season or during the season, writing out different goals and different aspirations I have for myself throughout that time too, is kind of
Yeah, let's put a pin in that. I want to come back to what you now do and what you've incorporated into your daily routines, because you have a lot of pieces that I think have gotten you to where you are. But so if we go back to middle school, was essentially in Buffalo, New York. Dad gets a job working for New Era, so we moved to New York. Do you remember Dad taking you to the frozen yogurt that day in San Diego and dropping the news on you?
Yeah, I thought the world was ending that day. It was another sunny day in San Diego. I just had a great practice. I thought it was a reward for playing hard or shooting the ball well or something related to basketball. And the best part was, sitting down with my giant heap of frozen yogurt. And he's like, we're moving to New York. And I think my first response was crying and being like, I don't want to live in the city. He's like, oh, we're going to Buffalo. I was like, where's the city? Oh, we're in Canada. But yeah, that was a huge shift that really, really was not fun at the time, telling to tell all my friends. I remember I'll never forget that, walking in, it's like probably that next day to school with Joe Caelan, and you like taking photos of us, and I know what's going on, and even some other of our friends were walking with us, like, why's your mom taking photos? It's like, oh. I told Joe in Mr. Valley's class as we were walking in, he starts hysterically crying, and then everybody else started hysterically crying, and even Mr. Valley, and it was like a really sweet thing. But then we drove across the country and showed up in Buffalo.
And you couldn't start because we didn't have your vaccination record up to date because of all the moves that we'd had. So for a couple of days, you and I went to the movies and did other things while we tried. And you were like, great, now I'm already behind.
Yeah.
And we go to meet the counselor. We walk into his office and he's got Duke stuff everywhere. And I thought, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And then we walk into Mr. Greenway's classroom, who was your first teacher.
Yeah.
And what was his story?
I honestly don't remember what his story
He was a lacrosse coach.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's all about sports. So
huge sports guy.
Yeah.
For like your homeroom, right? Just like the first 20 minutes of the day. I think even then connected with him, being the new kid 4 days late.
Well, and that's what I remember as a parent, being like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And that was it. You're like, I'm not going to make friends. Everybody else has already got to have their friends. I'm behind. They've all known each other. And there they even have buses. And I remember so clearly that first day, the school bus pulling up to our rental house and 8 boys coming off the bus. You not only made friends that day, you brought them home with you. Yeah. And I was like, okay, we don't need to worry. He's going to be just fine.
Yeah, it was such a great group of guys. And it was like by that week I had that great group of friends, which was awesome too, being in that little neighborhood where we could all walk to each other's houses and bike around and play basketball or trampoline or football or whatever. It was a great little community.
And we thought we were going to be there. We bought a house. We thought we were going to stay I thought we were going to be there for the next dozen years. And as fate would have it, that got cut short right before you were getting ready to start high school. And Dad didn't know exactly where the job was going to be. So I said, why don't you apply to a couple different schools? And you're like, you got to take this Catholic schools test. And what did you say to that?
Well, I remember being recruited by a bunch of the different high schools at the time and having already taken the Catholic school test for like Canisius and St. Joe's, thinking I was probably going to go to Canisius. And then you tell me about this school, Loyola, and we do the application. And I remember walking into the JCC, drop me off to go play basketball, and you're like, oh my gosh, you got in, And I was like, cool, and walked along and would later find out how much bigger of a deal that was.
We found out about it on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Brian Lusowitz called us from San Diego to say, Joe Caelan says you guys are moving to LA. I grew up in LA. If CJ still loves hoops, you should go to Loyola. Okay, LOYO, where is that? Right? Okay. And I went online and looked up the school, and they're getting ready to go on spring break. And I called the admissions office, and he's like, oh, we've already done our admissions. I said, oh, well, he got into this Jesuit school over here called Canisius. Oh, well, if you got it, can you prove it? Okay, great. Well, fill out the application. You're like, I want to go to Redondo. I don't want to go to Loyola. I'm like, fill out the application. We're probably not getting in, and you probably can't afford it anyway, so don't worry.
Yeah.
And 3 days later, lo and behold, you got in. And I thought, okay, let's just try it. So once again, you're the new kid. The first day, it says, wear formal dress at Loyola. And not having gone to Catholic school, we weren't quite sure. I'm like, oh, just wear a collared shirt. I'm sure you'll be fine, right? What happened on your first day at Loyola High School as a freshman?
Yeah, that was awesome. I think, dad being dad too was like, let's show up early. It's your first day. I think I got to this giant, if anyone has ever been to Loyola High School, there's the giant parking lot in front of campus, this circle. And I showed up and I'm the only kid standing there wearing, of course, in my mass attire, a giant floral shirt, some khakis, and a fresh pair of Jordan 11s with Nike Elite socks.
And shorts.
Yeah, the khaki shorts. Yeah. And slowly but surely everyone starts coming in their white shirt and tie and pants and dress shoes and looking around and being like, oh my gosh, I missed the memo. And I remember doing the hardest I could to like sit on my little iPod or something at the time and just try and be invisible because it was becoming glaring in a group of 300 boys. I was the only one not wearing that outfit. But I think also kind of what I was able to learn from moving previously and being used to being the new kid was that it was like, well, you can sit on your iPod or you can go try and figure this thing out. And put my iPod down and met Kali, started talking with him. And then I think it was a few days later too that next thing I know, I had a bunch of friends on campus, and then basketball tryouts happened and I was being completely wide open to how much more competitive LA basketball was than Buffalo, New York. And that was a bit of a culture shock too. But yeah.
So let's talk about your high school basketball journey. Freshman year, you played which level?
Freshman.
And how big were you back as a freshman at 14?
I was 5'8".
Maybe, yeah, 5'8", maybe 135 pounds soaking wet.
Got it, maybe.
Yeah. And so, but you had a great squad. Right?
Yeah, great team.
Yeah. In fact, you played with most of those guys for all 4 years.
Yeah.
One of your future best friends made JV varsity.
Anthony made varsity.
Anthony made varsity, so he wasn't with you, or you didn't really know him yet. But yeah. James Keefe and Blanco and all, Jake Perfett, like some really great guys. So remember freshman year, we decided as a family we were going to go down to Orange County for Thanksgiving, and you were going to miss one practice. Do you remember that you missed a practice and what happened? Actually, it was over Christmas. Sorry, not Thanksgiving, Christmas. We ended up going to Park City for a couple days, and you missed one practice and maybe even one game. Do you recall that? And do you recall what happened?
No.
Okay, this is interesting, parents, because it was traumatic to me as a parent because we have family that lives all over the world, England and Park City and Arizona. And so we were meeting up. And so we decided, okay, he'll miss 2 days, but who cares? It's 2 days. It's freshman basketball. Yeah. He's not playing varsity. They're not going to the state finals.
I wasn't even starting.
No, you had played really well. In fact, you'd gotten MVP. Remember the dance, the winter formal? You had gotten MVP of the freshman tournament.
Oh yes, I was the big deal.
You were the big deal. Yeah, so you're like all fired up, like, oh, I'm a really, really great player.
Wow, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Right? And so you had to go straight from the tournament to your dance and everything. Yeah. And then we hit Christmas hits and we missed, I think, one practice and one game. Right. And you came back and the coach just didn't play you for 2 weeks. And we watched you were like, and he didn't say anything to you either. And you were like, I don't get it. Like, I was just the MVP and now he's not even talking to me. And now hindsight's 2020 where you're like, I wish the coach would have just said, hey, dude, this is our policy. You're going to miss practice. You're going to miss a game. You're going to sit out for 10 days. Keep working hard. But what I watched as a parent was you just completely unravel. And it was really hard. And then once you were eligible to come back, it took you a good 2 or 3 weeks, and the season's not that long. Like you play through January and freshman season's over. So I remember that being a struggle. Okay. The next year you make which JV. Team? JV. And how did that go? Yep.
That was he was a different coach than my freshman coach. They were both very over the top. Freshman year was more like a track team, and then second year was this guy Picata, who was doing his things his way for 30 or 40 years. Had a lot of great JV teams. But that year too, I'm pretty sure I came off the bench, or maybe I started.
I think you started JV, and then varsity junior year, you started coming off the bench.
Yeah.
It wasn't till your senior year. And maybe by senior year, you're 6'3" or so?
Probably they're like 6. I think junior year I'm like 6'2", then probably like 6'3"-ish.
Okay. And so parallel to this, you're doing club, or AAU. We're new to LA.
Yeah.
You've gone to, I think, 3 different clubs.
Yeah.
Rockfish, and then Supreme, and then
West Coast Elite.
West Coast Elite, and being kind of promised, oh yeah, the silver team is going to be like the gold team, but that really wasn't happening. You weren't really getting any exposure.
Yeah.
And so between your junior and senior summer, you go back east to play in some camps, camps which I highly recommend. If kids have interest in playing at certain schools, go check out the camp. And what happens when you're back east at the camps?
Yeah, so I think even more context to that, Anthony and I end up doing probably like 7 elite camps in 10 days. And we are traveling literally by playing at like Brown, taking an Amtrak overnight, go playing at Penn, to then go walk to like wherever else was next, right? So it's this crazy time period. But I'm loving it. I'm playing. And we did those camps, and then I came out again.
Oh,
we
that's
went
right.
home,
Yep.
Came back, did the camps.
Yeah, I didn't go with you that time. Yeah.
And I was so dead bent on D1 or bust at the time. I had, over like 50 I had so many Division III schools reaching out.
But no D1.
No D1, but at the same time, though, we still went apart with the recruiting process. Visited, I think it was NYU and Claremont McKenna around that time, which is pretty funny. But we actually go out again because we get some generated email from Dartmouth.
No, you got that. Was Alex Pope found you in the summer, and that's when he called me in like July and said, "Would you come visit Vermont Academy?"
No. Well, before that, Mom. Before that. That was the generated email from Dartmouth was the reason, like, hey, they're having this Dartmouth camp. Could I go out again? And fortunately, you were like, yeah. So I think we flew back out there, show up to that camp. I'm pretty sure that was like my second or third time doing the Dartmouth Elite Camp that summer. And then, finishing a game. And my coach at the time said, I have a guy that you should meet. And there was this dude with a big cheesy grin on his face and a bright orange t-shirt. Started telling me about Vermont Academy and was completely confused because I knew it wasn't a college. But then learning about prep school, and he's name dropping the schools guys go to from there, and has built this incredibly successful program in the middle of nowhere, Vermont. And then you could tell what happened like a few days later, the call that you got.
Yeah, then he started recruiting you, but then it was also on that second or third trip to Dartmouth that Robert Eichart was there,
right,
with your teammate.
Yeah,
and we were like, "Oh, what are you doing? Our AAU thing isn't going very well," and we meet up with BTI, and that was we just jumped in with them.
Yeah, we just tagged along.
Because you had a visit set up with NYU, but we had like 3 days. We didn't have anything to do. It's like, we're heading to Penn. Okay, great. We'll go there. And then we're going to go see Haverford and Swarthmore and a bunch of D3s and a couple prep schools. We went to see Northfield Mount Herman. So taking advantage of, okay, this is what's being offered. Let's go do it. And we did. Went and looked at like 9 schools and you played in like 3 different places. And people said, I remember the Penn coach saying, we're interested, but A, the grades need to be there, and B, you need time to develop. If you were to go do a prep year, we might be interested in you because it was going to give you that extra year. So that was when you started being like, I think I really want to do PG.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like kind of one of the lessons that started to be learned and then implemented from that time period, which would kind of later determine other things, was not questioning what or why, things are happening, but instead of like, what do I need to do, and just showing up, whether that's playing those elite camps all the time. And then I think what's funny is when you take action on that, things happen, you know, had we not done those camps, none of that stuff, being able to meet, I think, two coaches who were the first that I just felt they believed in me more than I believed in myself, and Robert Eichart and Alex Pope, that ended up made it all worth it at looking back on it, being kind of like that was a really good idea.
Yeah. So let's flash forward to the end of your senior year, Loyola. You lose in triple overtime to Windward.
To go to state,
CIFs, right? I remember that car ride home. It was very sad. We felt awful. You were crying, saying, "I'm never going to play with James or Anthony,
oh Mason,
my, And the next morning, walking into your bedroom, and I remember your dad saying, "He's not going to go to school today," and your eyes opened, and you said,
"Oh,
do you remember?
I got work to do.
And you were like over it, and you had just like pivoted. You're like, okay, what's next? And then you spent the next 8 to 12 weeks before you were going to go out to Vermont Academy for the first time, working really hard. Remember, I think that was when you and Connor went to UCLA and trained with one of the UCLA players, and you came home and said, I got to eat better.
It was like, it was that car ride home from that game that I can remember. I think I was like in the fetal position in the back of Dad's car, but being so sad, but also recognizing like, I don't think I'm working hard enough, you know, and I think there's a lot more to do. And kind of had that idea. And then I think it was probably that week after that, get in the gym, Connor and I are scrambling to find gyms, end up showing up at, I think it was like a UCLA's rec gym, because he knew David Singleton was on the UCLA team, was hot in the gym. So, you know, he takes his shirt off. I take my shirt off, and he just starts laughing. And I remember laughing too, because I was looking at him and me, and I was like, I think I'm crazy for assuming I'm a Division I player right now. And that was a turning point too. That was kind of like, okay, let's really try to figure this out. And I think that was also a really awesome time period of Connor and I just kind of getting together and being like, all right, we're working out twice a week. I'm lifting twice a week with Mark. Let's work out 5 times a week. Let's lift 3 to 4 times a week. Then let's try and sprinkle as much other, you know, at the time it was just going and playing pickup or other basketball in as possible, and getting really serious about what needs to improve. It was also Eichart at that time too, telling me guys that he's seen make the transformation, what he thinks I needed, as well as Pope. So I was really lucky to have a lot of really great guidance for people who knew how to get to where I wanted to get to. And then it was no choice but to try and figure it out.
Do you remember having self-doubt? What if I go do this PG year and it doesn't work out?
You know, having seen Parker go through it more recently, I can remember some of those nights where, you know, you're looking on Twitter and you see everyone else with 5, 6, 7 offers, and you know you have nothing, and being a bit confused. But I think at the same time, I don't know if I really can, because I think I was just so focused on, all right, I'm working out with Connor at 11, and then I'm going to go lift at 2, and then I'm going to go shoot again at 5, and then I'm going to draw up a workout for the next day if I'm by myself, or I'm going to go watch Kobe highlights or some Klay Thompson film or something, you know, like there's just a lot, there's so much to be able to be done every day. And then I think also in that time too, we had those AAU tournaments where I played well, and I think it was like the last week of high school. It was the week I was graduating that I got first D1 coach to reach out, which was Ben Wilkins at Army. And I remember being like, I remember walking out of campus and I got like a DM on Twitter and being like, wow, I got the first coach to reach out to me as I'm graduating high school. And that being a very exciting thing, because it's like, oh, let's keep going with this.
Yeah, I think that was after Atlanta. I remember that.
Yeah, after Atlanta, he said, you know, a few other schools like Bucknell, Colgate. Colgate actually reached out to me at that time too.
Yeah.
Had a few calls, and that's where some of all the work that I had been putting in, starting to see some return on it, but also not thinking, oh, well, I'm here. You know, I'm like, oh, I'm far from this. Okay, great. it's in striking distance now.
Mm-hmm.
And can get to it too, but was also preparing for what was my Super Bowl, being the NEPSAC showcase weekends in the
So we get to that.
June.
Yeah, that's before you actually start school. They have all the prep schools get together and play in this big tournament. And
for the first time ever too. That was the first NEPSAC showcase. Yeah, that wasn't normally a thing.
Oh, and there's 200 coaches in the gym.
Yeah.
D1, D2, D3.
You name it.
Yeah, everybody was there. And let's condense that a little bit. But actually, sorry, let's shut this off. Let's skip ahead to okay. So you get to the NEPSAC tournament in July, and you've been doing all the work, and you have a little bit of outreach, and it's 2 weekends back to back. And what happens that first weekend?
That first weekend. Yeah, so I think there was, thinking back on it, there was definitely something, call it luck, call it whatever, some kind of divine intervention that essentially, right, of all the NEPSAC teams from AAA to B, which, is 70, 80 schools, meaning that's hundreds of kids, that there were like 2 teams that actually got to use just their roster. It was us and like Worcester. And so fortunately, I got to play and meet all of my new teammates. And I think I also got lucky. Remember, they had like a warm-up drill, right? Where you play like 3-on-3 for 10 minutes. And in that 3-on-3, I think I hit like 7 or 8. Just boom, 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 boom. Not even thinking. And from right then, meeting Nana and Bijan and Josh and instantly gaining their respect. And I think, and then was kind of off and running from there. And I ended up playing one of the best weekends of basketball in my life that first weekend. But yeah.
And your phone started blowing up, to the point that night, actually Cornell had reached out as well. And so we were talking, okay, we've got 2 weekends, and in between we can go look at some schools. We might as well take advantage of the time off.
We had Army, Cornell, and I think like Colgate as like unofficial, kind of more courtesy. Yeah, we'll let you come on campus and like walk around.
If you're here, come on by.
Yeah.
But then your phone rang late at night, and it was Greg Paulus.
Yeah. I think, was that after the first weekend or the second weekend?
First weekend, because that's the first thing we did was drive up to Buffalo.
Yeah, I can remember after that first day, it was like the first game I hit like 7 or 8 threes. The second game, I think I had like 9. I remember just playing my absolute butt off and screaming the whole time, and I'm sure laughing as I'm doing it, but also wanting to beat everybody so bad that getting out of the game, and then all these random numbers start texting me, hey, I'm this guy, hey, I'm that guy, and then getting back to the hotel, and this guy Greg Paul is calling me, and that was one of the coolest phone calls I ever got. Is, hey man, Coach Greg Paulus, I'm at Niagara. Great, doing the normal thing. And he's like, yeah, you remind me of somebody I used to play with. It's like, oh, well, is that, I don't know who you played with. Yeah, JJ Redick. And I was at Duke. I'm like, excuse me? Greg Paulus being one of the all-time great Duke guards, part of many of those great Duke teams, and then instantly Googling him as we're on the phone and being like, oh my gosh, what? And then I think we went out and visited, what was that?
The next day.
Next day, yeah.
We got in the car and drove there.
Yeah.
And that's the other point, right? Like if you find something that's resonating with you, show up and start showing up. And that's what we did. We spent that week traveling to every school that had showed interest in you. And you're like, I'm not going to West Point. Doesn't matter. Everybody talks to everybody else. Or this year they're sitting in this chair. Next year they're sitting at the dream school. They all know each other. They all sit on the baselines next to each other. It's how you decide to show up and let them know you're interested in what you're doing, that they go, gosh, I really like that kid. Greg Paulus reached out to me 2 weeks ago. It's a reflection of you, right? Like you left a good taste. You never ended up wanting to go there. And that was fine. He was okay with that. But it was just the process and how you handled it, which was again, being grateful for everything, like every school that showed you interest, getting on the phone. How many coaches do you think you talked to that summer?
I wrote everyone down in my notes.
Yeah.
Numbered all of them.
That was the other story we forgot. I asked you to write down what would your dream schools be. Remember that?
That's a great piece of paper, yeah.
Right? I think we have that. We have to dig that up somewhere. And you wrote, I said, just anybody who would offer you. And you wrote down 25 schools. And at the end of that summer, and none of them, maybe one or two had heard of you at that point.
Maybe like Army. I think I just put it on there because I knew they I'm somewhat interested.
And by the end of the summer, how many had reached out or had offered?
I want to say it was like I remember filling up an entire piece of paper, and it was like school, location, potential major, conference. It was like categories that felt like a homework assignment, but turned out to be one of the best homework assignments I've ever done. Let's say there were 25. I want to say heard from probably 23 of them, offered by probably 10 to 15 of them, most of them.
In one summer.
From having nothing.
Yeah. And that to me is the power of intention and getting clear on what you want. And that's why I asked you earlier, like, did it occur to you that it wouldn't happen? I don't think it did either. I think you were so focused on, and I remember us talking about it, like, I'd rather have gone for this PG thing and tried to get the D1 than 10 years from now going, I wonder if I could have done it.
And I think too, right, was also important was that we went into that PG experience with, okay, all we need is one, even if that's I'm recruited to be a walk-on at Bryant. If it's D1 and they're willing to have me, I would be interested.
Yeah.
And then completely over-exceeding on what we set out to do. But I think what's also important about that time period too of the NEPSAC showcase with playing that first weekend and then us just staying out there was, fortunately I was able to generate some interest, but then you were also awesome enough to be like, well, can they see you today? I'm like, Mom, no, don't embarrass me. And she's like, well, we got to show up. And then what also ended up happening was, because we visited, what was that? Like Princeton, I remember Fairfield. I mean, oh my gosh. Niagara, Cornell, Colgate. Yeah. There's definitely a few more too that I'm blanking on, but it was essentially you and I in a rental car all over the Northeast. I think so. I would love to get like a Strava tracker of us, because it must have looked like a giant, just like ball of yarn.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's when you got on Princeton's radar too.
Oh my gosh, well that's a great story too. Of them reaching out and saying we have an elite camp. I think it was like a Wednesday night. We were somewhere. And so I called Pope, like, should I do it? And he's like, yeah, dude, go get some shots up. Because I had I hadn't touched a ball since last Sunday. We were spending all of our time in the car. I had actually gotten my Army offer the first time after that weekend. And I walk into the Princeton camp, honestly kind of scared I'm going to be rusty, but literally, talking to Pope, he's like, just shoot the ball a lot, which is great. Great advice, telling shooters to shoot. And I go in, I want to say I airballed my first shot, and then I probably finished that game like with 9 threes, played another game, 7 or 8 threes, and everyone's like, who the heck are you? And I'm like, how many offers do you have? I'm like, I just got Army West Point. And then sitting down with Coach Henderson, and he was like, that was probably the greatest elite camp performance I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And
would you consider going to Princeton? And you went, and I was like, oh, yes, he would. Your jaw was on the ground. What? Like, you couldn't even believe that words were coming out of his mouth, right?
Oh my gosh, at all. Yeah. I think it was like Sky Etten too. He showed up and was nice enough to come and say what's up to us. And then that felt good. And I think after got to go drive around campus in a golf cart.
It's awesome.
And I was like, this is great when I play well and just show up, it was, and then from then they were totally on the radar, and great relationship with those guys, and that was super cool. And then fast forwarding, I think. Yeah,
in the interest of time, maybe let's cut ahead to, you making a decision and how that went. We have COVID in the middle, you make a decision, COVID hits, you move home for 5 months or whatever. But so let's talk about your decision
to go to BU.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, my heart was dead set on Bucknell. This is one of my favorite stories. I show up at Bucknell, telling me, I'm number one guy. Everyone's really bad, and I show up. There's another kid there. There's another kid on my visit. I thought I'm the guy, and his name's Miles Brewster. And so we start talking, and I'm like, hey, where have you visited? And he's like, oh, I really want to go Ivy, but I don't, we can't get any aid. And I actually visited the school, BU. And I was like, oh, they offered me too. I haven't, talked to them that much. It's like, yeah, we're both kind of like, it's in the middle of nowhere. We're just not loving the visit. And so it kind of piqued my interest and end up finishing that visit knowing that it didn't feel like home. Unfortunately, Dad was smart enough to say, well, then you don't have to go.
Yeah.
It's that easy. Yeah. You have other options. Let's look at the board. Sitting in the Philly airport, like conference calling you. I'd also, I think, lost my wallet.
Yes. You left it in the airport at the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah. Left my wallet in the airport. So didn't think I could go back to fly back, and scheduling visit with BU and Penn. Penn staff was lovely enough to have me, even though they knew that financially we could have probably make it work. And visited BU and was like, this is just way different than the other visit, and committed there. And then Miles Brewster ended up being a teammate for 3 years, and also on that visit too. Anthony Morales was on that, and ended up committing, and that's how I ended up at BU, because getting on that campus from after being in Vermont, BU felt like downtown Manhattan. I was like, this is awesome. There's civilization here and people.
You kept saying there's a CVS across the street. I'm like, I know. How cool is that?
That shows you exactly what Saxton's River is like.
So COVID hits in March. You come home for spring break from post-grad, and you never go back. And then I move you out to BU. We drive up to Vermont, grab all your stuff out of the abandoned hockey rink, and you start college in the middle of COVID, where you guys are just 5 guys in a room, and I don't think you even practiced together then, did you, in the fall?
We would practice in pods.
With masks.
With masks, like across the 3 different courts in the gym by class. Couldn't use the locker room. Had to get changed in our dorm room, go run down to the gym, show up, practice, get out.
Couldn't meet anybody in the cafeteria.
No, and of course, coming in as a freshman after a year of prep school too, where all my other buddies had these huge freshman years, that I couldn't be more excited to be a freshman. And I think, unfortunately, as everyone else experienced with COVID, it being quite a different year.
Mm-hmm. So you eventually get COVID right around Christmas. In fact, I remember you being in COVID prison just until like Christmas Day. You're going to be there anyway because of basketball, but you get out of there and the season's getting ready to start. Although you played, 4 of the teams 5 times or something.
Yeah, we played Holy Cross 7 times that year.
Just kept playing the same. And a couple days into you being back in January, you collide with the biggest guy on the team, and there's blood running out from under your mask, and Coach Quinn says, I don't think you're looking good.
And of course, I'm spitting out blood and kind of loving it. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna show them I'm tough. Yeah. I just had COVID and I'm back. Look at me. I'm hitting shots still. And he ends up, he's like, no. He's looking at me. Apparently the other guys told me that like my eye, I wasn't looking at anybody. Like he was trying to tell me to look at him, and I just wasn't able to make eye contact, and was like essentially just closing my eyes. And so I go down and do the concussion test. First thing, I just fall over, and the trainer's like, yeah, you're concussed. And I had no idea what that really meant, and what that was going to entail. Never had a concussion before. Mm-hmm. Fortunate enough to never have experienced any surgeries or breaking any bones even. And that ended up being almost a 3-month recovery. I think, it was as anyone else who's had a concussion too, is it's one of the hardest injuries because you can't see it on the outside, and it messes with everything on the inside. Mm-hmm. So it was back to the drawing board of, I had spent that last entire COVID time just eating up weights in the backyard and surfing and playing basketball, and getting so ready for BU, and then feeling like I'd lost a lot of that progress, and then got back on the horse and started training again that summer. So I ended up missing the rest of my freshman year. I played 2 games. We got smacked by Colgate, and then preparing for the Army game, get a concussion the day before, done for the rest of the year. Couldn't even come to any of the games. I couldn't come to a game until I think it was the last game of the year, where I ended up playing at Colgate in the playoffs, losing to them. But yeah, it was a
journey.
So
he joins BU right in the heat of COVID, but gets to move in. And let's take it from there. Talk about maybe that experience. We touched on it in the last one, talking about you getting a concussion and then not being able to play for 3 months. And you start figuring out what your major's going to be. You start, academically, you adjust. Maybe talk about your BU experience a little bit.
Yeah, and then I think from the year after that too, training the whole summer and then showing up, and I actually slightly fractured something in my foot. So then I didn't get to play my first game sophomore year until we were about 8 games in.
That's right.
Which that, of course, I can remember that happening and being like, oh my gosh, am I going to be one of those guys whose career is just injuries? And getting really overwhelmed by that. But staying the course and focusing what I could. And then into sophomore year too, finally being healthy, then cracking the lineup and getting to play. And
we should mention how many guys, because of COVID, they were allowed to stay, and they had a bunch of guys so maybe there were 5 or 6 that were super seniors, essentially, right?
Yep.
So then you're adding this whole new dimension of not only is it hard just to make it as an underclassman, but you've got that many more with seniority above you, right?
Yeah, that sophomore team it was probably the most talented basketball team I've ever been on, where I feel like we had 2 player of the years. Suk won it, but Javante was also player of the year. And I'm competing with guys like Damon Tate and Miles and Ethan and Jonas and all these really awesome players, for essentially between kind of me, Damon, and Ant was like, maybe if we go in and hit our first shot, we get 10 minutes, but also that being at the time thinking that was normal, everyone else must be competing with 7 different guys at once for one spot, but realizing too, a lot of that also had to do with the situation of COVID and that extra year of eligibility for a lot of my teammates.
So fast forward to last year, a year ago, is technically your junior year.
Yep.
Academically.
Yeah.
But your sophomore year athletically.
Yep.
And what happens?
That year ended up being pretty tough. I still was kind of stuck in the same spot of having to compete with different guys for minutes. And I think was just feeling very stagnant and like I couldn't move forward as hard as I was working. And I remember so well, we had a defensive attitude chart that tracked every practice statistics of, you get a defensive score basically, right? And if you're in this certain threshold, you play, and if you're not, you don't. And sitting with Coach Quinn in September and being like, numbers aren't that great, it's not looking like you're going to play. And I just hysterically started crying and was so broken down by that. And fortunately, he was a player himself and played, high D2 level, and he got all of it and was able to be a good voice in my ear during that time. But I think, if everybody from the outside was able to see, like, I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself, and I was able to recognize that, but I wanted it so bad that was, I felt like, the only way you could show up, was I essentially kind of then, went through the rest of the year just trying to keep my head above water. And I think then what that unfortunately doesn't lead to is really wanting to take the next steps or being even allowed to develop and step into my capabilities as a player. And by the end of the year, I think I remember kind of coming home and thinking, like, what would you guys think about transferring? And hating that idea too, because it's the last thing I want to be is a quitter, and I'm not trying to quit, but I think it was obvious for me, and I think probably even the coaches there at BU too, that there could be a better fit. And so starting to think about that and get really serious about, in the same way we had done before in high school, about what are my priorities right now. And it kind of came down to a few simple things. I think one of them being, okay, can I go somewhere and get a really great education again, to also put on with, well, before that it was, can I graduate? At 3 years, we ended up figuring out if I took 7 classes over 2 summer semesters, I could. And that was a process I had to do all by myself, running around campus, calling advisors, calling deans, calling counselors, looking at summer classes, scheduling meetings. It was my memory of that time period is flying up and down Comm Ave on my scooter before, after, in between class, to go ask people questions. But I think, yeah, I mean, also at that time too, I'd felt like basketball had done me dirty. And, I think also when you love something so much, you don't anticipate it, but you realize you can hate it just as much. And I started to really hate playing basketball at that time period. I can remember the last 10 games of the year just not being there mentally and hoping he didn't play me because I might go in and throw a fit. I was just so upset. And finishing out that year and just being glad that it was over, but also still very confused about what to do, because God forbid I'd go somewhere else and I have the same thing, or what if I transfer and maybe I don't have any options,
and let's be honest, you didn't have many stats. So getting in the portal was also a problem when...
Sorry, let the dog out.
Yes. When you don't have, it's not easy to just throw your numbers up on the board and have 20 fish, 20 people surround you and say, great, we'll take you. Right. They're like, oh, well, what are your stats? And you're like, well, I don't have a lot. So that was also limiting into what was possible for you. This is what I deal with all day.
Yeah. Puppy. Sorry, the dog is confused. Go sit down.
Okay, so you figured out that you could graduate with 7 credits.
Yep.
By the way, personally, you're also struggling. You're, in a relationship you're not sure you want to be in anymore. That was challenging. Breaking up with that, you're breaking up with the coach and the team potentially. You're having to research new schools. And what was your heart telling you? I remember asking you, do you even still want to play?
I feel like my answer might have been maybe, I think. I mean, knowing what I know now, it was yes, more than anything. I wanted to just go play. And like you mentioned before too, I know most guys who do the transfer thing, right? It's because they played at this small school, they average 16 points a game, and then they can transfer up. For me, it was kind of the opposite, where in 3 years at BU, I averaged 3 points a game, 10 minutes. So I knew that potentially going D1 was out of the question. And so I started thinking like, okay, well, it's a huge hit to the ego, especially for guys at the D1 level, to think about playing D3. It's so beneath me. But I had, I forget who it was, but I think I also was just kind of following along with Coach Klatsky at NYU and seeing Spencer Friedman at NYU, where, he kind of had a similar situation. He was at Harvard not playing as much, and then going and being All-American, and it seemed like he was just having so much fun. And through some family friends was able to get connected to him and got to speak to him, and he told me what that life was like, and it sounded like a dream. Is essentially, I think for anybody listening to this too, is that of course D1 is definitely the highest level of competition, but I think more importantly, or for me, what D3 is a much more humanistic approach to basketball and academics, where first you're a person, second you're a student, third you're a basketball player. And maybe even lower than that, you're a basketball player, right? Or maybe, some of these guys got jobs, some of these guys are involved in clubs, doing hobbies, or other things like that. And so getting to hear too that instead of a 10-month a year practicing schedule, it's now down to you practice 2 weeks before the season, you play the season, and then you get time off, and then in that time off you play open run and you get a job. And thinking, okay, well, is there a place too I could go that also would have a great alumni network or an opportunity to, even though I still don't know exactly what it's going to lead to or what, a dream position would be, is that there's got to be a place where there's got to be some pretty good people that help me with that. And so it was then kind of sitting down and being like, okay, well, I know that I'm not a hot topic transferring up, but transferring down, I'm a huge fish. And so that was exciting too, is that even though the competition is different, I really, having finished my first year of D3 basketball, there are phenomenal players at Division III. Even in the SCIAC alone, our conference is littered with guys who easily could be on Division I teams. My teammate Josh Engel could start for any team in the Patriot League. The exact same thing.
As your dad said, who played D3 and D2, he said generally it wasn't about skill; it's just about size, right?
Yeah.
That makes the difference.
Yeah.
So how did you then go about, because that's the other thing, is parents who are like, oh, okay, great, but how do you go about transferring? How did you go about figuring out where you wanted to be? And flash forward, you were able to say, okay, I can graduate by August 15th. So technically I could be a grad student somewhere, right? Was the goal.
Yeah. And even during that time too we can back up there. The first thought was, okay, well, I want to go to NYU. It's perfect. I want to be in New York. It's in Manhattan. They have great resources. Oh my gosh, NYU, BU, that looks great. It seemed just perfect. I transferred in the portal. They reached out to me. It was all going well, and thought it was going to be a done deal. But you
applied.
I actually ended up applying on my own too. The staff was new. They didn't know anybody really. There's no way to help you get into that school. I ended up applying, getting in, and
calling me gutted
because also realizing too, they had a roster of 20. We're coming off one of their best years in program history. I showed up to play pickup. There were 2 other D1 guys trying to do the same thing I was doing, and had heard, oh yeah, this player of the year, and then that first team all guy. So everybody wanted to be there, and rightfully so. It seems an awesome place. And kind of realizing that we're looking for more of a 4 and a 5, and being like, well, I'm 6'4", I can play 4 at this level. But also realizing, like, if I'm gonna be leaving, I'm no way I'm leaving to not go play me, and play the way that I want to play. And I think
we talked about everything. Like, okay, so maybe you just go to grad school and you don't play. Remember,
right?
We had that whole discussion, and you were like, oh, maybe I could just be a grad assistant. Am I ready to just coach? Is that what I want to do?
There was a good 2 or 3 weeks, where there was a really good 2 or 3 weeks, I want to say, at the end of April in 2023, that I thought that was it. That I was thinking about any option to get to be a part of NYU, willing to do whatever it took if it meant I got to be in and around that team, and not even willing to look other places. And I think it was then, kind of fast forwarding to about first week in May of realizing that really isn't the right opportunity. But oddly enough, what happens is I get a call from Coach Katz at Pomona Pitzer, and then I think a week later I get a call from a guy, Ken Scalmanini, at Claremont McKenna. And I remember so well sitting in the lobby with Miles, and Coach Scal is talking, and he is just hard selling me and CJ Jones and Claremont McKenna, and just, oh my gosh, he was electric. And I remember crying, laughing.
Talking about him, he's been there 25 years, or
I think almost 30, yeah.
Almost 30 years at Claremont McKenna. He's a very winning tradition, right?
Yeah.
And focuses on what, do you think, as a coach?
Love.
Yeah.
Love. I think that's his whole philosophy, whether he's aware of it or not. And so realizing, okay, well, that's back home. I wouldn't hate going to school in Southern California. I've kind of always wanted to go be in Southern California. There's no winter there. And oh yeah, Claremont McKenna is like one of the best schools in the country. And even though I wouldn't be in Claremont McKenna as a student there, I get the association by being on the team, and I can, CGU's got to be a good place. And oh, I have 2 years, and they have a 2-year MBA program. Oh, well, an MBA is, I think, one of the better degrees you can find that has some utility in after college. That seems pretty interesting. And so I think then in that period, just kind of letting my guard down and be like, all right, well, we can go visit and see what happens. And we went visited there, and I remember sitting in his office with you and Dad and just being like, I love this guy. And we had a number of phone calls that were hours long of him not saying a word about me as a player, but selling me as a person and what the community would be able to do for Caelan.
Mm-hmm.
Not Caelan the shooter, not Caelan the basketball player, not Caelan the athlete. The different identities we all wear. What mattered most was me, which was like so wild to hear too. And of course, he's like, you'd be really good here and all of that stuff too. But having just kind of conversations about life and him telling me his story, and so end up agreeing. And fortunately enough, oddly enough, Pomona and Claremont are both part of the same graduate school, so that only meant 1 grad school application instead of 2, and then I could make a decision off of that. And had a great relationship with Coach Katz too, and went and visited there. Sorry, the dog's really trying to get out.
Come here, Papa. Come here.
Yeah, so then fast forwarding to middle of May, we go and take a visit. And I think just from sitting in his office, it's like, how do I not want to play for this guy?
So you go back and grind at BU, finish off your last summer session, which was heavy, move home, and then everybody's already figured out who they're going to live with. So we figured out, we could get you a single not far from campus in Claremont, and we go to move you in. And I remember you were like, I don't think I can stay here tonight. And you came home with us.
Yeah, I was miserable and confused and a little more confused. Because again, too, I had, and it was even at that point that we had also kind of agreed, like, hey, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Just like, okay, well, let's get to October 1st and see how we're doing.
So I said, let's do 30 days. Yeah. Just see what happens for 30 days. And if in 30 days you're equally confused, and what are we going to do between now and then? And the other thing you kind of said is, I just got to remove all the extra. Like, I'm going to get off of social media. Yeah. I'm going to block all the other noise that's coming at me, so that you could hear you, right? Because there was so much coming from the outside that you didn't even know what you wanted.
Yeah. And it was also then, I think I remember getting to like October 10th and being like, oh, right, we said October 1st. Totally forgot about that. And then starting to get acclimated with the guys, and it's starting to feel more familiar. And I think, I don't want to jump the gun, but I think, a lot about a conversation I had with my head coach, where he brought me into his office. This was now in the end of October, so like 2 weeks before we were going to start practicing and getting ready for the season, and things are shifting and more serious. And him basically being like, I know the past few years have been rough on you. This is a place you can let it all go. And I think we both fought back tears because I felt so loved, and I think he loves me so much that he was doing the same thing and reiterating that as he's talking. And I just remember, I remember making him a promise from that day, because I don't think my actions of being as involved with the team and what it really took to get what I really wanted, it was just, I wasn't there. And I think I needed that permission that, like, look, this is a place where you're cared about, where we want you to succeed genuinely, right? Not because I need to win games, not because our program this, not because we have a reputation of any kind, purely because we know there's something there. And from that day forward, started showing up 30 minutes early to practice, which then turned into an hour before practice, which then would turn into 2.5 hours before practice. So I go cold tub, then hot tub, then lift, then shoot, then go to practice, and then lift again, then shoot, and then cold tub. And then it just slowly started building. But that's kind of later too, as we can stay in the beginning half of the season.
Well, and so the beginning of the season, you start out 2-4. You're not starting. In fact, a couple games you barely got off the bench, right?
First, 5 games of the year, I think I probably played a total of 40 minutes. So like 5 to 7, 8 minutes each game.
And why do you think that was?
We had some guys on the team still who were returning from last year who were taking a good amount of the minutes. And also that I was still proving myself to the staff, but I think also to myself as well too. And what was great about that time period was that, there's of course I'm the D1 transfer. How are they not playing me? For most people, that's either, this guy's stupid and I knew I shouldn't have come here. Oh. And then for me, it was great. Thank you. I'm going to show you. You don't think and of course, I think the funny part in this, kind of how I work too, is creating some of that narrative in your head a little bit of like, all right, I know Scal, I know he loves me, but you don't think I can go guard Josh 94 feet? Watch, and then what ends up oddly enough happening, right? We start the year 2-4 with a group that we are, between us, me and the grad guys, very confident that we can have some serious success with this team, and being dumbfounded that we're now coming back from Texas, getting to start playing league games, which are serious for us because you get automatic bid to the tournament, and that things needed to change. And
what happened in that moment? There was a team meeting called, right?
Yeah, Josh called a team meeting, and one of the most honest conversations I've ever had as a player with other players. Him and Stewart and Rhett led a great conversation that I think from that day forward changed everything. You could feel it from the second we then stepped out onto the court to go practice, as everyone's talking crap to each other, and then we ended up, and then here's oddly enough too, well, we were actually, I think we were 2-3 technically. We were playing Chapman on a Saturday. We 2 guys quit the team. They left. We had one of our best practices on a Friday. We then go and play Chapman. My first game starting. All my buddies are in town. Everyone comes out to the game. I know everyone's watching. I'm like, oh yes, this is gonna be it. This is the Caelan Jones coming out party. 10 minutes into the game, we're down 28-4. And scratching our heads. But looking back on it, what was going wrong was we had this way completely complicated motion offense we were running, and there was just some systemic things with the basketball that needed to change. So took a breath, and then this is also a nod to having great coaches who listen, as he realized, this isn't working for us, and we got Will King and CJ and Josh, like, we're an offensive machine. All right, how do we do that? And then bam, next game we go, and that was also such an awesome story, as we're playing Cal Lutheran, who
2 freshmen, Reed and House.
Well, they were House wasn't even in the lineup at that time.
Yeah.
But playing Cal Lutheran, and me and Will King are kind of joking like, man, if we lose this one, we're gonna be
long season.
This is gonna be rough, dude. And we're like, all right, let's just focus on this game. We're playing in the game. We're up 5 at halftime. Josh cracks his head open, gushing blood down his face. The warrior that he is, he still wants to play. But Josh goes down. He's kind of the heart and soul of our team. And there's a freak out. We're all kind of like, oh my gosh, Josh is down. But in the locker room, we all got together. Rhett spoke up, I spoke up, Will King spoke up, bench guys spoke up. I think it was this, and it was kind of like, it was almost kind of like do it for Josh, which we then end up going out and winning the game. And from there it was like, oh. And I think we went on like a 13 or 14 game win streak after that. Just bang, 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 bang. And things started clicking, and I started to begin to dive more into what else I could give to the team, and
how we can get better.
We
talked about this yesterday too, but I loved when you start talking about, and it happened, I think, more and more as the season went on, but instead of focusing on the outcome, you started really focusing on your process. So maybe dive a little bit into how did your daily routine change from the beginning of the season when you were like just getting your head above water, not sure if I want to be here, to no, we're all in and we're going to make this happen.
Yeah, because I'm even now thinking about the way I've spent the past 2 months versus the way just on a daily routine basis from November and October, which isn't that long ago, is it's like there's two different people. Go ahead. Oh, I think so. I think first of all, what made it possible was being able to be around Josh Angle every day, getting to see, okay, what does the best of the best at this level look like, you know, and kind of being able to then, you know, compete with each other on a daily basis too, at practice and in games, in a way of pushing each other and him pushing me. And so like, okay, it was kind of as simple as like, how does Josh do this? Okay, well, he wakes up, he makes breakfast, he's working. If he's not playing basketball or he's not working out, he's doing homework. He's okay, interesting. And I think it was around, so this is now around probably January, that of course things are tensing up a bit, realizing, okay, we're now full league's going to start, that the fact that we're whatever, we're something in 4, that our chances of an at-large bid are really, really slim. I mean, honestly, no chance unless we win our tournament. And I think for me then realizing, okay, you know, I think I'm focused, and then realizing, well, I could be, there's still a lot of extrinsic stuff that I'm very, very consumed with. And
like, what did you get rid of?
One of the first things to go was my hair, which again too is also, I would love to reiterate for anyone listening, is like, none of this stuff is an aha overnight moment. There's so much, it's sometimes it's days, it's weeks, it's years of in the making of that thing. I think a funny thing is I'd always been very concerned about my hair playing basketball. I was like, do I look good and whatever? And I forget, I was watching. So, and oh my gosh, and shout out to Failure. We go and play our rival game, Pomona. We get absolutely jumped on. We lose the game by 20. I'm really unhappy with how I played. And I'm watching the film back, and like 3 minutes in, I'm like, I've touched my hair 3 times. It's gone. So I just remember kind of being at that point where I think it was like, okay, at the end of the day, I want to do this for me, you know? It's not to please or flex on anybody. It's because I want to win a championship. I want to be, and I want this team to realize its full capability. And that next morning, it was that Monday morning, I woke up, I deleted all of my social media, I shaved my head, and I think I probably went to the gym right after that. Went to Roberts.
You had been already meditating though and journaling every day already, or no?
I had inconsistently been, and from there the routines basically from that day on was wake up, cup of coffee, go outside, journal, go on my walk, make breakfast, and then either watch film or go to the gym, go lift, and started doing what I used to do at 8 years old, and watching film of myself. I used to go and put my iPod underneath the basket and watch how I shoot and take notes on how I could get better. And I think it was that shift of really falling in love with the process, which then just felt like a rebirth, you know? And then the next game, I end up scoring 30 points and end up getting thrown out of the game, which is first time Scal's ever had that. So it's a fun stat. But anyway, it was...
You kind of shifted. Everything shifted.
It was, I finished the game, my best game of the season, and I stayed for another hour and a half in the gym that night because I was in love, just in love again. And also like, oh, well, I could have made, I missed those 2-3 heat check threes, and that was probably because I was thinking about, I have 26, I could do 30. Just focusing on the process. And yeah, and then I think from there, just keeping everything right here, right now. What do I need? What can I do today? And because that's all that really exists, right? Not, okay, what didn't I do earlier? What's it going to be like in 2 weeks when we're in the tournament? Okay, if I focus on, for whether it's my shot mechanics or my footwork or my positioning or my body language, of just like getting really locked into those details, that I can get better. And then kind of doing that every day and then getting better, then feeling more comfortable, and then getting to a point where, again, basketball felt like breathing. It didn't feel like this suffocating thing. And I think what's also funny too is I got to hear from a lot of people that come to my games and see me play is it's a performance, is like you say all the time, is I'm like smiling, running up and down the court, and my teammates kind of mess with me about too, of where it's 2-minute game, it's tie game, and I'm cracking jokes with the other bench because I'm loving it. There's no better place to be. And yeah, so I'm like,
well, yeah. And so fast forward, spoiler alert, you win the conference. You end up getting to go up the ladder and cut down the net and have that. How did that moment feel?
I don't think I was just actually looking at the photos of that yesterday. I don't think you can find photos of me with a bigger smile on my face where I even, I didn't play the way I wanted to play in the championship game, but that did not matter at all. What mattered was that we won and that everyone got to experience us winning, from number 1 on the team to number 17 to the coaches. And it was such a village effort, and there was just so much joy, but at the same time, we were also like, now we can start rocking. We've known we're one of the better teams in the country. Great, we're locked in. We don't have to worry about if we're gonna get our name called. We're in that bad boy.
At one point, you're ranked 24th in the country. Is that right?
We bounced around the 20s.
Okay, but you end up playing a team from Texas,
St. Thomas. Yeah,
St. Thomas, who was ranked.
They were ranked ahead of us.
Yeah,
we were like a 10 seed. And I think, there was and I think one of the things that had shifted too was, I'd like to believe I played some factor in this, is that I think when I showed up with my head shaved, and everyone's like, so why'd you do it? And I'm like, because we got to win. And people were like, oh,
time.
Show up and Josh cuts his hair the next day, and other guys are staying and shooting. We start doing player-led film sessions where we get together the night before and go through clips and just watch a whole game together. And it's a very Socratic type discussion where everyone's allowed to speak. And I don't think anyone's ever scared in those little meetings too. They're fun because you're watching basketball, but also you're building confidence for the game. What I also noticed a lot of that time, right, where even St. Thomas, right, who much more athletic than us, ranked higher than us, had much bigger wins on the year than us, all those little metrics. So watch them play, okay, we can do this thing and that thing, and then, oh, well, they gotta stop me and Josh, and they gotta stop King, and they gotta stop Rhett, is, I think, prepping for that week. And also knowing that, in a way, we kind of weren't supposed to be here, and that there's nothing to lose, is the most free feeling, in that we didn't have any pressure on us. And I think then fast forward to the game and play great, and we win the game. And ends up getting close at the end, which got a little spooky, but we know we controlled that game from start to finish. And thought we were going to get Kalu in the next round. They end up getting upset by Whitworth, the super scrappy team from Whitworth, and play them in the second game of the tournament. And it was funny, as I remember being so incredibly tense because I wanted to win and to not have it be over right here, right now, so bad that I kind of wasn't fully there and able to play. But the beauty of it and having a really great team is that when I'm not on my game, someone else is on their game. Will King steps up and has probably his best game of the year, where he's dishing and diming and scoring and screaming and doing all his stuff. And Josh is Josh, and Reed Jones comes off the bench and is locking their guy up, and Householder's hitting big shots, and Rhett's knocking down shots.
Free throws, Householder.
And free throws. And, and that's where too is then, and I, as you remember, I finished that game and I just was in this kind of state of shock because I wanted it so bad, and I also knew too that I wanted to win 4 more games to get to that national championship. But I think again, in a way too, that was also such an awesome lesson, which then formulated the way I showed up the next game, of that as big as it is, the best thing about it is it's just basketball. It's just basketball. And the worst thing to do is to go out there and not play, like just play. It's play. It is play, if it's college and it's March Madness and it's the national tournament and all these things. But more importantly than that is it's a really awesome game with an orange ball that is so much fun to shoot, and yeah, I'm not too long-winded here.
No, we could see how tense you were, and it's one of those games where, like, the harder you try, the worse it gets for the ball going in the hole, right? And I have a very clear memory towards the end where you could tell, like, you tried, I don't know, 3 or 4 threes, they didn't go in, so finally you're like, okay, fine, I'm going to go to the hole, and they call an offensive.
Get to charge.
So then you're like, now what do I do? Right? And so you very towards the end, you try to take another 3 and it bounces out. And I just have this clear, like, you were walking with your head down, your shoulders slumped. We're winning, but you're so hard on yourself that it was like, wow, like, and I was like, put your head up, but you realize how in your head you were about it. But like you said, the team all rallied, and that's what great teams do is, okay, we're going to hold you up when, one person can't, is in their head. So that the next game, so that was 64-32. Now you're getting to the Sweet 16, which means flying to Virginia and getting to play at the host, which was the number 1 seed in the country.
Yep.
In their home gym, in their neighborhood, which ironically is a little bit like home for me, having gone to school 2 hours from there at William and Mary. So that was really amazing to have my college volleyball coach come to watch you play. Tell me about how you prepared differently for now it's the Sweet 16. How am I going to look at this knowing that I just kind of had a rough game?
Yeah, so the past 2 weeks where our SCIAC tournament to get to March Madness was a Friday, Saturday, NCAA tournament's a Friday, Saturday. And those weeks before, I was honestly overexerting myself. Now it was instead of 15 minutes of film, it has to be 30. And then instead of watching a TV show or playing my guitar, I have to be watching The Last Dance or more film, And I was kind of burning myself out. And also too, playing like back-to-back games, play 40 minutes, you're just aching the next 2 days and realizing like, okay, because I go to bed and I don't touch a ball today and I'm put good food in my body and I hydrate and I recover, that's better than going and trying to crank out 500 shots and a bunch of pull-ups. So I think then coming into that week too and kind of spending, what was kind of fun too is be able to spend like the Sundays with you guys and some of my friends and get to be able to enjoy that moment too, because special and fleeting. And And I think a lot about conversations we had and I had with Anthony, and just of kind of like in the best way, all there is to do is just smile about it and enjoy it. And so going into that week, what was a lot different was I approached it like 10-year-old Caelan was watching me and thinking about how proud he would probably be of me and how he would tell me to like go shoot again, and have fear of what? Just you miss. Okay, I'm gonna make the next one. So caught a break. And yeah, in that week too, which is then funny, is I think I just decompressed a lot, and obviously, was still doing maintenance on my game and focusing and watching the film and all the things I needed to do, but had a much more casual approach, an easy approach to it. And I think spending, it was like a 14-hour travel day, drive down to LAX and then fly across the country to North Carolina and then drive up 3 hours to Hampton, Sydney, Virginia. And, you're like sitting in the middle seat, it's D3 and got crying babies left and right, and get there and you're like new time zone, all this stuff. But I think like from the first moment walked in the gym was like, oh yeah, I get to go play. And again, I think coming in then to that Nebraska Wesleyan game on Friday night, I knew that, I think then also being really uncomfortable with the fact that it could be the last game is, of course, you're human. I don't want to fail and I don't want it to be over. But also at the same time, if it's going to be over, I'm going to make sure it's not going to end on a game like the Whitworth game where I'm like, that game is just a lot of regret because I should have just showed up differently and everything would have been better. So I walked into this game, I think also kind of telling myself too, like, if I missed a shot, that wouldn't make a difference in the next possession. I knew they played a zone, which to any shooter listening to this is paradise. And came into the game. I think I like I almost airballed, I think, my first shot watching it back on film, but shot it and was like, oh, that felt good. Okay, great. Next time down. Then bam, next one went in. Next one went in after that. The next one went in after that. A few more and started going, and was just kind of in it. And if you want me to finish the story out too, is that, going to halftime, we're down 12. Nebraska Wesleyan shoots 70% in the first half, which is all games of the year to have a game like that. They picked the right one. And, we're pretty stunned. We're kind of kicking our butt a little bit. But we know we're a pretty resilient group and we'll be all right. And I think also, oddly enough, I had like really jammed my finger. I think it's like sprained. It's still pretty fat. But I end up getting it taped. And I can't use my left hand at all. Like trying to make a pass, it literally like pops out every time. And I was like, oh, I thought I was going to lose my finger. I get it taped up and then I'm like shooting around. So I'm like, oh, whoa. I'm like, now that my shot feels really good. Half starts. I think I hit boom, 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 3-3-3. Then again, kept it going. And, it honestly, the momentum too, we never were able to kind of stretch out our run to cut it even closer. So we were still down 12, 10, 8, 14, 10, like all the way down to the last 3 minutes. I think of them with our last media timeout, looking up and being like, all right, here we are. Let's go leave it all out there. Let's just turn it up a little bit more. And again, I think to the resiliency of my teammates too, guys who, again, don't back down and aren't going to go out not swinging, is then, oddly enough, Josh comes down, gets an and one. I think I had another shot. Housey gets a shot. Next thing you know, we're like down 10 with 2 minutes left. And you're like, oh shit, we're still down 10. This is kind of out of the picture. A minute left, what were we down, like 8? And then I think at that point, cut it to like, at that point I hit another one.
From the corner.
Yeah, the crazy, like falling out of bounds over a 7-footer, which was awesome because I was like, I'm falling out of bounds. Well, I should shoot it.
Might as well.
I'm not going to get a turnover. So that's better than that, right? hit that one, cut it to like 7. They miss free throws. We come down, cut it to 5. We cut it down to what? It was a 3-point game at one point, 20 seconds left. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, yeah, we're coming back. Like, I knew it. Like, this is so us. Yeah, this is so great. And believe they missed a call. It should have been our ball out of bounds with 15 seconds left down 3. Doesn't happen. Go down and make some free throws and end up losing by 4. But I think the part though in losing that game that made it different than the other losses of the year was that there was so much to be proud about. You know, it was kind of like, yeah, you lost the game, but you lost the battle, but you won the war. You know, and realizing that I think in the best way that our group had given its true potential, and also too we lost to a really good team. So it's, you can live with that, and you can live with giving your best effort.
Well, it's been fun to have a front row seat to watch the last 23 years of you chasing this dream and catching this and having this moment. Last week was so beautiful to be there, and to the resilience and the grit that you've had, that you've shown. And why I thought it was so important to share your story is, I think a lot of times we look at somebody from the outside and, oh, well, that's great that he got to go dance. And, oh, it was great that he had a D1 scholarship. And, oh, it was great. And you see the highs. And of course, we don't advertise the lows, but I remember coming in the fetal position last August when you came home with us. And I thought, I don't know if this is going to work. Yeah. Right. And that wasn't that long ago. So seeing you fight back, push through, and then finding the right people to surround you, like you mentioned with Coach loving you the way he does and all of his players, that makes all the difference. And I'm so proud of you. And I'm so grateful that you kept swinging and kept fighting and kept clawing, even when it didn't feel like it was going to go.
Yeah. And then, like we talk about all the time, there's those roller coasters too. And when you're so focused on a small part of it, right? It's everything sucks. Of course, everything's awful and things are good, things are up, but take the broader scope of the picture, right? Like, didn't think playing Division I basketball was possible. Hoping to get one offer, getting like almost 20 offers, get a concussion, miss my whole freshman year. It's COVID, not being able to crack the rotation, then playing a little bit, and then maybe getting hurt again, and then being like, oh my gosh, I don't love basketball anymore. Rock bottom. Oh, what am I doing? Like, what has everything been amounting to for this time? Oh, fine scout. Oh, okay, well, I'm still confused. But then what ends up happening too is, I think the huge thing was then flipping my focus from outside to inside, is then, bam, going to the Sweet 16 for the first time in program history, winning the SCIAC championship, finishing the year scoring 34 points and hitting 9 threes in my last game of the year. I'm back, you know, which that means so much more than just as an athlete. It's like as a person, you know, and it's kind of growth on all different levels. And I think, it's kind of, I think if there's one thing I'd love everybody to take from this too, is that kind of your journey is your journey. And at the same time, it's the reward, you know, that's the best part of it is, of course, being conference champions and winning games in March Madness and now being part of the CMS history forever with this team, receiving those accolades are phenomenal. But it's not about that, because what's so much better is just that group of guys, you know, and like the hardest part is that we all don't get to practice together anymore still, because everyone just had so much fun. And I think that's another great lesson. And I think how to lead people and how to get the most out of people is, I'm a huge believer in leading with love and curiosity, you know, and you can lead with the stick and you can scream at people, and you know, you can get some good stuff out of that sometimes too. But if you have a lot of love, and I think also are able to be really honest with yourself about, okay, I feel like I'm giving it my all.
Am I?
Well, like also, I'm still concerned about my hair. That was the huge flip of like, I'm doing this to maybe post on my story after, or so that maybe this person sees this, or that I look good, these super trivial things that, again, and especially, spending a lot of that time, like, I think I watched The Last Dance all the way through like 3 times. Michael Jordan doesn't care about what you think about him. Mm-hmm. What he cares about is winning. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a powerful lesson. Kobe Bryant doesn't care what you think about him. LeBron. Like, none of these guys, you stretch that to CEOs, to athletes, to people who I think are just successful. And also the people that we all gravitate towards are people who are just locked in right here, right now. And all of the other stuff just takes care of itself. Mm-hmm. It all just falls right into place. So, and I think that's what I'm the most excited for, to continue on my journey of, okay, can I turn up my intrinsic focus even more? And how else can I build more self-confidence? And then, what next year is going to be like, getting to be the guy on the team and the leader. And oh my gosh, what an awesome opportunity to be able to grow as a player this summer. Like, I can get better and really help us next year and continue to take this program to a national height now, right? Where I think hadn't been before. And now the goal is like, we want to go to the Elite Eight next year. We want to go to the Final Four. We want to win the national championship. What does that need? And then also what's funny too is, like, as you can remember last season, as soon as the season ended, I don't think I wanted to look at a basketball for 3 weeks. Season ended. The next day, Anthony and I were outside getting shots up, working on our game. Yeah.
3 days later, you're playing in an open run.
Yeah. Going and playing
Which
pickup.
tells you everything you need to know, that you still have the love for the game. And that's what this is all about, right? That's what this is all about. And ironically, one of the last chapters is your journey, your recruiting journey, and now your younger brother's recruiting journey. And I tell parents all the time, like, it has to be their dream. And if it's not like my dream for you, of course it's wonderful that I supported it, like for me, like to get to ride with you. But if it was me shoving it down your throat saying, oh, we could get this and we could get that, it's not going to pay off. And for you to be like, I can tell already, even last night watching your brother play, you went outside and shot right away, like, because you're still starting to like, oh, I need to get back to it. And feeling that. So let me finish with one question we ask everybody that comes on the podcast. And you can finish it with a word or a sentence or a thought, whatever comes to mind. The best athletes I know do this. How would you finish that statement?
Don't stop shooting. Yeah. Continue to shoot. Because I think also the lesson in that is, a missed shot can be a missed shot, or it's a piece of information about how to make the next one, and I think that is a metaphor that, if I can expand to every aspect of my life, relationships to future career, basketball, of course, or surfing or music, you're just allowed to get better, and you're not brought down by that you missed. You're happy that you missed. And you're like, oh, can I go miss again? Let's see how many more times I can miss. Because I think you are also a living embodiment of practicing what you preach. I don't know how you do it. Seriously, it is one of the most admirable things. But what you do, and I pick up a lot from you about, is you're going to try. And be damned if you don't try. And the worst thing you can do is not. So don't stop shooting.
Yeah.
Keep shooting.
Done's better than perfect. You try it. If it doesn't work, okay, we can try it again at least. But you got to take a swing. And if you don't take a swing, you never know.
And there's always an option. And even if the option is no,
yeah,
great. There's a response to that.
Exactly.
There's always a response.
Now I know.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too, Mom.
I'm so proud of you, and this is so fun.
This is awesome.
So thank you for
spending
your spring break with me.
Nowhere else I'd rather be.
Right?
Yeah.
I even get to hug you. Yeah. Even better. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of this. We'd love to hear from you. Jump in the notes. Send me a DM on Instagram at Kirsten Jones Coach, or on my Substack, Kirsten Jones Inc. Send us notes about whether this resonated with you. And if you have questions, you can follow Caelan at Caelan.
Yeah, I might still be off Instagram. I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe he's on social. We're not sure. But if he is, you can look for him there. If not, send me. I know where to find him.
Yeah, that's a better one.
All right, let's do this. Hey, Kirsten and Matt here, talking about recapping our newest episodes, and this one was obviously particularly special to me. That it was my firstborn, that it was the first one that I went on the whole sports parenting and sports parenting journey with. So having CJ sit next to me here in my little office and talk about his journey, hearing it through his eyes, was super special.
Yeah. Well, let's start. Tell me what it was like hearing it through your eyes, getting to hear his perspective 23 years down the line, 22 years down the line as his mom.
Yeah. He's a thinker, and he analyzes things a lot. And I think most of the time that really works to his benefit, because he gets the stuff out of his head and he's able to move forward. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of him on is, if you listen to the whole thing, you'll hear it was not a straight line, that there are plenty of ups and downs, and, every headwind, not ridiculous headwinds. But he had major concussion. He had recruiting headwinds. He had playing time headwinds. Then he had personal life headwinds going on at the same time with, a relationship challenge, which again, we all have versions of those kind of things going on in life. And, to me, it's always, not, is it going to happen? It's when it happens, how are you going to choose to respond to it? And last summer, he was having, as Susie likes to call it, the dark night of the soul. He was in a very, very, very bad place. Actually, I don't think we got into that much, and it was up to him to go there, but I know he won't mind me saying that, he fell out of love with basketball. He said, I don't know that I'm going to play again. And again, I share that because I think I talk to a lot of kids who are having those moments themselves. And it is, do I pivot? Do I go on with my life? And, whether I'm in 8th grade or senior in high school or, middle of college or, a pro, but having to make that decision. And as parents, what we said to him is, and what I would like to have him experience is that he chooses to walk away versus feeling like the door got slammed. And to me, that's when he took the power back and said, I'm going to graduate early so that I can go have an experience somewhere else that potentially, not guaranteed, but potentially could be a better fit for me. And thankfully, he did his research. He, talked to, I think, 7 to 10 schools in the second round of figuring out where he wanted to be. No, he wasn't highly recruited. He was in the portal, and no, he didn't get any D1 offers or interest because he really didn't have the minutes to. So you have to then decide, okay, am I okay to go D3? And I think there's a lot of ego in that, feeling of, oh, well, this is bad. No, it's not. Like, you need to go where you're wanted and go where you're going to play and go where you're going to feel like you're valued.
Happy. Yeah, where you're happy.
And you saw a couple of his games with us this year, right? Like, yeah, that's the best CJ version I've ever seen, right? And to know that he could be in such a dark place last summer and then have, and it didn't start that way. Even this season started slow, and he was, coming off the bench, and the coach was like, I'm not just giving you playing time just because you were D1. You got to earn it. And he started to really buy into being a leader on that team. And the more he did that, the better results he got. And the season ended up honestly being, I think he would say, arguably his best year of basketball ever.
Yeah. Tell me, away from a little bit from the basketball part, tell me what it was like, or the emotions that go with being a mother, watching their child go through a hard time. And give me the full roller coaster of he's going through a really hard time in the summer to the round of 16 game.
So yeah, it's a tough question, right? Because I I'm wired for positivity. So I focus on what's next. And when you're in that moment of, he was really, really hurting last year. He was seeing, and he would share with you, he's seeing a psychiatrist. He was having dark thoughts. And again, I think it's something that relates to a lot of kids. So then as a parent, like, I could care less about basketball. I could care less if you ever play the game again. All I want is for you to find yourself and to be happy. Well, if basketball could be a piece of that would help you be happy again, then let's work on that. But if it's time to say goodbye to basketball, like, and those were the discussions we were having. And then honestly, when we moved him in Claremont, he just said, I don't know that I can do this. And it was really hard. In fact, the first night we went out there, moved him in, and he's like, I can't stay here. And he came home with us. And then I had to take him back out the next day. And I just said, okay, let's make a deal. Let's give it 30 days. And if in 30 days you're absolutely still miserable, this is not for you, for whatever reason, no harm, no foul. Like, you've got a college degree, you can pivot. This can be done. But I would hate for you to throw the baby out with the bathwater before you even try it. And he agreed. He said, yeah, let me do that. And I'm going to get off my phone. I'm going to shut off all my devices. I'm going to shut off all my apps, because that echo chamber of what are they doing and what do they have and what is she doing? And it was this perfect storm that I think we're all living in now. In fact, this is the next on my to be read list, the anxious generation. Like, we are all being driven by that FOMO, and that it's awful. And so he did. He agreed to
it. Yeah, we can't run away from the comparison.
Yeah. He did it. And in 30 days, he said, I'm a different person again. Like, you started to see signs of him coming back. And that was a beautiful thing. And I had no idea where the basketball was going to go, but it couldn't be bad, because he was running, it was getting exercise. It is something that he loved. So he started to feel that love and joy again. And then he was very fortunate in that he made a very good choice in coaches. He interviewed both of the coaches at the Claremont schools, and one felt a little bit more strict and, top down, and this is how I run things. And the one that he said, this guy, I spoke to him for 2 hours, not even about basketball. He just wanted to know about me. And back to Steve Kerr and people management, right? Like, that's what this whole journey is about, is finding people who see you for who you are. And that's the beauty of where he is right now.
Is there a level of comfort that comes with knowing the coach that your son is spending, as an athlete, we spend more time with the coaches than we do with our family. So is there a comfort that comes with sending your child to somebody? And like, as a 22-year-old, we don't like being called children, but I know as a mom, he's still your child. So sending your child to know he's in such good hands, and someone who is leading with love, and someone who is truly caring for him.
Yes. And pushing him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just spoke to the coach today. I haven't spoken to him since we dropped him off last August. I mean, aside from saying hi to him at a game or two, but I don't get on the phone with him. But I was trying to help another athlete get connected to him. And so I reached out, and he called me back, and he just said, he's like, yeah, CJ is completely bought in. He's recruiting other players. He's trying to help the program become better. He sells it better than I am. It's like, he's becoming a leader. And for me to know, and he said, the point of my story was, he said, and he likes that his mom pushes him. He said, oh yeah, I'm going to move home for the summer because I got an internship near home, and I'm not going to be sleeping until noon. There's no way my mom would allow that. I was like, yes. And he said, and he appreciates that you're holding his feet to the fire. And that was actually interesting. I asked him, about recruiting, and I'd watched the Dan Hurley interview about parents, and Coach Ken Scalmanini, he's the Claremont coach, and he goes, you know what I do? And I said, what? He goes, I interview the moms. I'm watching the moms, not the dads. And I said, oh, why is that? And he said, because if the mom is holding their feet to the fire, is not letting them get away with everything, it's going to make my job easier. And the moms that are like, well, whatever he wants, well, I'll come make his toast. Well, I'll make his bed. Well, he's like, it's a lot harder. And he goes, the dads are usually pretty, suck it up, son. But when you have a mom that's too mollycoddling, too, taking care of everything for him, that he doesn't know how to take care of himself. So he gave me a nice compliment, I think, in saying CJ appreciates that you're on him, and you're telling him, like, this is your deal and you've got to drive it.
Yeah, I mean, as anybody would tell you, they want to be guided. They don't want to be told how it's done or shown how it's done or done for them. So any coach is going to be, excited that a mother is not giving them a coddle child, saying, here you go, your turn to coddle, because no coach has the time for that.
And I think my job is for you to fly out of the nest. And if you feel like you need to move back in and I need to do everything for you, I have failed. That is how I look at it. Is my definition of success is that my 3 children will say, wow, this was amazing, and it's not going to be easy, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I got this.
Yeah.
Raising empowered athletes.
Yeah. And there it is. And that's what you're all about. And I think that this episode really got to show that. And as a friend of CJ's and as someone who's been working with you now pretty closely for a few months, it was such a pleasure to be able to watch this podcast, to edit it, to be a part of it in some way, just because I got to see, I got to see CJ go through, his rough time. I got to see him thrive this year at a completely different perspective, and getting to hear a very open dialogue between you and CJ was such an amazing opportunity for me. And it was really fun for me to be able to just be a part of it in some way, because I know I got to probably hear some stuff that you didn't get to hear when he was going through a hard time or the good times. And there's a lot of stuff that I didn't get to see either, being at arm's reach away. So it was really, really interesting, really fun for me.
So parents, if you're going through this, or if you're an athlete listening and you're going through this or have gone through this, like I like to say, success leaves clues. And just because you're hearing a success story, they made it to the Sweet 16, does not mean that before that it was all roses. It's an up and down journey for us all, and we all have different things that are going to get in our way. And again, I hope that this podcast is a light in that journey for you to say it's possible. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.